everyone. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you, Bronwyn, for inviting me to this special seminar. As Bronwyn did the introduction, my name is Dr. Madhumi Mitra, and I'm very, very delighted to share with you my journey that is both deeply personal and also grounded in science. Now, today's presentation brings together my personal journey, decades of research, and our emerging work, or rather current work, at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore in sustainable agriculture with emergent technologies. And of course, seaweeds are also integrated into it. So, you are recording the meeting. So let me just click. Okay. So here is the outline of today's talk. So I've divided my talk into 3 sections. So section A, I will share what led me to pursue my research or work in seaweeds. Section B, we will explore the nutritional and biochemical richness of seaweeds and why they matter in relation to human health. And that is going to be my primary focus. So that's why, although I've been working in other areas of seaweeds, such as bioenergy and biomonitoring and bioremediation, I'm not going to be talking about those, subtopics in today's seminar. I will be focusing primarily on seaweed nutrition, my journey, and of course, how I was led to doing research in seaweeds, as well as loving seaweeds very passionately. And then also the current, research that we are doing at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore with seaweed biostimulants. So these are the 3 sections. All right. So this section is it's a personal journey to me, and it is also very close to my heart. And I usually share it with my students, and this is something I've also been thinking about, sharing with the entire community so that people become more aware of the tremendous benefits the seaweeds, offer. So going back to 1993, when I was pursuing my PhD in botany at North Carolina State University, I experienced a moment that profoundly redirected the course of my life and my scientific career. So I was a very dedicated graduate student doing research and spending long hours in my lab. And one fine day, or rather one fine morning, I noticed a small lump in my neck. Just like any graduate students, I thought it was not a big deal. So I ignored it. But it persisted. It started growing. So that's when, I thought I need to seek medical evaluation at Duke University. And that's where also my husband was working at Duke University. He's also a graduate from Duke University. So I had to go through biopsy. When the biopsy results came back, the oncologist gave me the news that I have a thyroid tumor with questionable cells. They didn't say that it was malignant, but they said, we sense that something is not right. And based on the size, it could be something we need to get rid of. So they didn't say, you have thyroid cancer. I didn't hear from any of them, okay? I don't know. Nowadays, people are much more forthright. But they should have. So I asked, so what are my next steps? So the oncologist informed me that due to its unpredictable nature, surgical removal is mandatory. And following that, I have to be on hormone pills throughout the rest of my life. Now, overall, I'm a disciplined person, but when it comes to taking, medications or pills, I tend to even skip some days, not take anything, any vitamins, because sometimes I feel lazy about taking the vitamins. So that way I'm not very disciplined. So I asked a simple question. What happens if I forget to take my pills? Well, the oncologist looked at me and said very bluntly, "You would die." Well, I was in my 20s, deeply immersed in my studies, and suddenly, at that moment, I confronted with my own mortality. This moment actually became my wake up call. And then I asked for time. I actually asked him, like, could you give me, at least couple of months before we jump into this, surgery? And it was, granted because I needed this time to prepare myself mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So that was my turning point. So during that time, the time that, was given to me, I turned more towards my internal being and started changing my lifestyle. Prior to that, I had very bad habits, like I used to eat all kinds of junk. And then I didn't really care about too much of, exercising. I mean, prior to that, when I was growing up, I was an athlete, but then I kind of slowed down and, I was like more engrossed with my, studies. And so health was like, of no importance at that time till, this thing happened. So what I did was I started, adopting some mindful practices like yoga, meditation, Tai Chi. And most importantly, I learned about the macrobiotic diet that was, developed by a German physician, and his name is Hofland, and he later became the dean of the medical school at the University of Berlin. And the book was written in 1797. So I did like, find that book, at the library in at the Duke University Medical School library. Like, I'm a voracious reader, so I used to spend like, hours in the library. And the name of the book, the way I remember, it was The Art of Prolonging Human Life, written in 1797. And later on, the concept of macrobiotic, it was expanded by Japanese educators like George Osawa and Michio Kushi. And there are many good books, by Michio Kushi that are available, like, pretty much like, on every bookstore. So what is the macrobiotic diet? So macrobiotic diet emphasized on whole grains, fermented vegetables, and seaweeds. And seaweeds, especially nori, wakame, kombu, hijiki, does. Now, so all of these, and some of you have like, responded to Bronwyn's, second question, like, what kind of seaweeds you would like to have. And I'm glad, like, to see, some overlaps with your responses. These are the seaweeds I started consuming. So, as a botanist, I was very fascinated, like, with this approach, like, being on a plant-based diet and also like, incorporating seaweeds. And of course, eating seaweeds is not something like, I embraced immediately. It was an acquired taste. So it took me some time to get used to it. So, I did embrace this lifestyle and I did incorporate, seaweeds into my meals. So I changed not only what I ate, but how I lived. As I mentioned, like, health became my topmost, priority. And so the next one is, let me go back. So I had a follow-up visit because I wanted like, more time. So I had a follow-up visit with the oncologist. So it was like 3 months, I kind of played with time. Initially, he wanted to see me in a month's time. I said, no, like, I'm like very busy with my semester. So can I get like, 2 more additional months? So those were granted. And what happened was during the follow-up visit, I was examined by the team of doctors as well as by the oncologist. And they looked very confused. And I thought like something, wrong has happened. So the oncologist came and told me that my tumor had shrunk significantly. I said, wow, that's a great news. But then they said, like, we still have to keep an eye on it. So why don't you come back, within the next couple of months? So it was like, I mean, I was very thrilled, but still, like, it was not like I still had it. Like, it had shrunk, but that did not mean that it had disappeared completely. So after 2 months, so that means after 5 months, I went back. And they did like, imaging, like, ultrasound and then x-rays and everything. And then I had to like, return the following day. It was not instantaneous. I had to wait. So the following day, or maybe couple of days uh, after I went back, and they were looking at me and they were saying, "What have you done?" I said, "Oh my God, what?" I it didn't make sense to me. They said like, we are really, we are in a state of disbelief. I said, I mean, related to what? And also, I could feel that I could not feel anything. I thought maybe it has metastasized, or maybe it had, who knows what was happening with, with my system. Because, human body, like, it's like a miracle. One day it's great, like, you feel like, you are in a, um, really healthy state, and then the next day you might feel very down, like, you're not responding to certain things. So it can happen, it can fluctuate. So he said that my tumor has totally disappeared and asked me what I have been doing. So I did share, what I have been eating, and of course about the macrobiotic diet and my lifestyle changes. One thing I remember that the oncologist told me was, perhaps it is time for all of us to reconsider the importance of natural resources in our diet. And the other thing, I mean, they are like really well-known oncologists, from Duke University. Another oncologist, and a female oncologist, I remember telling me, well, this is between you and me, but I can tell you one thing. Cancer is the biggest business in the United States. I was like literally shocked. I was like staring at her. I said, oh my God, she's telling the truth. But it's like, this truth is really harsh for others, for the profession. And this is what she said. She said, we want people to get cancers, the oncologist, so that we can make more money. And this is such a wrong thing. And she told me that she was contemplating to change her profession. So, wow, like, that was one of the wow moments I had. So, that moment, crystallized something powerful inside me. It was really more than a personal healing. I felt that it was the beginning of a mission, a calling to understand the science behind what was happening and what I had been living through. So, so how healing became a calling. So after I graduated, like, I also, I was looking for a job. At that time, my husband, he moved to Maryland. He accepted a job with the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. And I was an ABD, so I was like a year, I mean, I finished my, proposal defense and everything, my exams, and I was also looking for a job. So I did find a lecturer job at the University of Maryland, where I actually uh, started teaching. I didn't start my research. And then there was a pressure to finish my PhD, which I did within a couple of years, after I started my job. And once I finished my PhD, I became a tenure track assistant professor. And that's when, I started thinking about, writing proposals and how I can bring in seaweeds in my life. So I also started teaching a class in marine botany and principles of biology, with a focus on plant biology. And then the more I read, I became, closer to what I really wanted to do, like pursue a career with seaweeds. And uh, after I became, an assistant professor, I also started putting together proposals to United States Department of Agriculture. And one of the proposals on seaweed nutrition and environment got funded. So I was ecstatic at that time. And that was, the base for me to start my seaweed research. And I was given a lab. I had set up a lab, and then I recruited graduate students and started my research in full swing. So my research started in seaweed nutrition, and then it's spread to bioenergy, and then biomonitoring, bioremediation, and everything centering on seaweeds. I'm still working with seaweeds. I'm looking into how seaweeds can be used as biostimulants, to improve, crops yield, and how to also enhance the antioxidation potential of various plants. So I'm working with other plants too, uh, but my focus has always been plants and sustainable agriculture, and how seaweeds can be employed to answering certain questions and addressing certain issues. So as you can see, this is my research group. It has actually expanded, and our research areas have spanned from nutrition, bioenergy, sustainability, ecology, and agriculture. So, but the center theme has always been seaweeds. All right, so I've been talking about seaweeds all the time, and you must be wondering, she's talking about seaweeds without defining what seaweeds are. So, seaweeds are uh, seaweeds are plants. So that's what I tell my students. First, respect seaweeds. Seaweeds are plants. Okay, seaweeds are not scums. These are marine algae. So seaweed. Why weed? Because they grow in a prolific manner. They grow, profusely. And sea, because these are found in marine and estuarine environments. Now, seaweeds belong to three major groups: green algae, chlorophyta, this is the division; red algae, rhodophyta; and brown algae, phaeophyceae. So it used to be called phaeophyta, but it lost its division status, and it has class status. CEAE, anything ending with AE is a class, and the division is chromophyta. So I'm not going into the taxonomy; it can be very complex, and it's actually something that is sometimes very controversial, because when the taxonomists jump in, they bring in all these different kinds of logic, and sometimes you agree with them, sometimes you don't. But overall, this is what is accepted, and that is what I'm presenting. These are photosynthetic plants. That means they can fix carbon dioxide. They are preparing their own food, and they're actually making carbohydrates, and feeding all the other groups of animals. So those that are dependent on the seaweeds, they are multicellular, and they're important primary producers. These are primary producers because they can photosynthesize, and you can find them across the globe, in every pretty much in every coastal ecosystems. And our region, one good thing is, I'm very close to all the beautiful bays and the oceans. And we go there. I take my students on field trips, and we do collect different kinds of seaweeds, and they love seaweeds. And the color is based on their pigment. Like chlorophyta is, the chlorophyll A is the dominant pigment. Chlorophyll A is present in all groups of plants. And that's why plants are plants, because of chlorophyll A. Rhodophyta has chlorophyll A, but that is not the dominant pigment. Phycoerythrin is the pigment that is imparting the red color. And Phaeophyce has a brown pigment, which is fucoxanthin. Phaeophyce, the browns, do have chlorophyll A. So chlorophyll A is universal, but what is happening is the dominant pigment is masking the green one. That's why browns appear browns, reds appear reds, and greens are greens. All right, so this is something like, I share it with my, students like in every course because they need to understand what we are facing in today's world. Now, today, humanity is facing what the scientists are calling a global trilemma. That means three interlocking challenges that are threatening not just our health, but our food systems as well as our planet. The first challenge is food insecurity. Across the world, more than 2 billion people do not have access to nutritious food, and this is a fact. Our agricultural systems are very strained. Why? Because of population explosion, soil degradation, water scarcity, and the unpredictable effects of climate change. So, traditional farming requires vast amounts of land and fresh water. So, these resources are increasingly becoming very, very limited. And the second challenge is our dependence on fossil fuels that are contributing to greenhouse gas emissions. And that is actually, those are leading to climate change. And eventually, what is happening is we know that our ecosystems, both marine as well as terrestrial ecosystems, the land ecosystems, are under a lot of stress. And the third challenge is the environmental degradation. Like, with urban sprawl, with population explosion, what we are doing is we are clearing the land, we are cutting off the forest. We are seeing less and less greenness nowadays, deforestation. Then we are like, using fertilizers to, growing our food rampantly. Like, we are not applying the fertilizers precisely. That is something like, we need to be more mindful about because like we have this no care attitude, Okay, like, we want like things grown big and faster. And of course, if you like, go to Ocean City or to any place, you'll see like how people are trashing. And it's very sad, but true. Plastic pollution is one of the major pollutions. And these microplastics, when they enter the food stream or like in our system, they can cause not just like, cancers, but other ailments like, our immune systems are compromised. Like, when we accumulate these types of uh, non-degradable, components in our systems. So overall, it's not just the humans, but they are also impacting other species. So basically, we are threatening our biodiversity. So you may ask me, yes, we agree with you, or you may not agree with me, but these are all driven by science. So what are the roles of seaweeds? Well, seaweeds, they actually sit at the crossroads of all three challenges. First of all, seaweeds, they do not require arable land or fresh water. They are very much resource efficient. They're grown in oceans. They capture carbon and they can heal marine ecosystems. So as mentioned earlier, like, the other aspects of my research have been biomonitoring, bioremediation, and bioabsorption. That means like, seaweeds, they have the potential to tell you to what extent the marine or the coastal environment is polluted because they can uptake heavy metals and other metals. So they're excellent detectors of metal pollution. And what we have also done in our labs is to bring in all these seaweeds and the dead biomasses and use them as biosorbents because uh, even like in some of some states they're using seaweeds to purify the water system because they are they can absorb as dead masses. Not I'm not talking about the live ones. They can uh, absorb all these different kinds of toxins from the water as well as the metals and purify them. So they have been used for wastewater treatment. And bioremediation is when anything which is in a toxic state can be uh, changed to a non-toxic state by bioorganisms. So bioremediation. So the biological specimens, they are the ones that are um carrying out this role. And seaweeds are no exceptions. They are excellent agents of bioremediation. So carbon sequestration, they are photosynthesizing, and they're also very nutritious. So if they are harvested well and they are processed, they can provide great sources of proteins, amino acids, vitamins, minerals. And that's something I'm also very excited. And our topic today is on human nutrition. So why seaweeds matter? So they are they can grow in a prolific manner, and they have nutrients. They're nutritionally dense food, and we don't need any farmland, no fertilizers, no fresh water. They can be grown in tanks, if the right ingredients are added. You have to maintain the specific salinity, pH, and they will be growing. And of course they are capturing carbon, and they can recycle nutrients. Hmm. All right, so let me share a few things about my research. So I have been studying the various seaweeds from the coastal base of the Delmarva Peninsula. And two of my research sites have been Indian River Marina in Delaware and Chincoteague Memorial Park, of course, in Chincoteague, Virginia. And we did not find any suitable sites. I mean, when I say suitable, I meant that the species that we are studying, they were not consistent throughout in Maryland. Of course, some of the species were. So we did samples, from some of the sites in Maryland, but most of the times we were sampling from Chincoteague as well as, Delaware. So these are, some of the species of interest. Of interest means these are some of the species that we have been studying for various purposes, starting from biomonitoring, bioremediation, biosorption, as well as nutrition. So here, top right, we have Fucus vesiculaceus. Actually, top left, sorry, top left, left, if you look at the slide, left side, the top left side is Fucus vesiculaceus. That's a brown seaweed. And then top right is Gracilaria tigvei. That's a red one. Alva lactuca, middle left. And middle right is Codium fragile. It's the common name of Codium fragile is dead man's fingers. They are gross looking, to be very honest with you. But let me tell you, all of these seaweeds are called sea vegetables. Why? Because they are edible. So all sea vegetables are seaweeds, but all seaweeds are not sea vegetables. So there's a distinction. We cannot eat every seaweed you find. Of course, I wouldn't recommend you're going to, the bay harvesting the seaweeds and consuming those seaweeds raw. Why? Because as I said, they're also indicators of metal pollution. So you do not know what is going on inside their systems. They might be accumulating heavy metals, which you do not want to take into your system, even if you know that these are sea vegetables, edible. And then finally we have Enteromorpha intestinalis. It looks like intestine. That's why the name, has been given. And alva lactuca is sea lettuce, and that's very common. Like, you can find it in miso soup and also like, seaweed salads and other, different seaweed dishes. So we have like three greens, one red, Gracilaria tigba is red, and then brown is Fucus vesiculosus. So we kind of, captured all the groups. All right. So this was a very intense study that was conducted by two of my graduate students, and we had also several undergraduates working on it, and we published in the Journal of Phycology a while ago. And we are still continuing with some of the other aspects of the study, especially with respect to amino acids. So let's look into Fucus vesiculosus. This is the brown one. So from the results, I mean, if you are interested in this, paper, like, this is the citation, you should be able to find it from the library. And it, talks in details about the study, like, the seasonality, how it impacts, the nutritional constituents of every seaweed. Because, we are in a place, in a state where we see all these distinct seasons. And so our studies were conducted over a period of 4 years. And we also like, looked into the seasonal variations of all these different, nutritional constituents uh, across the seasons. So what we found, so I'm going to like highlight the key findings. So we found that Fucus, the genus Fucus, of course, we worked with Fucus vesiculosus, showed higher fiber content, like compared to the other species. And usually, Fucus has alginates in their cell walls, and it's like more sturdy. Like, when we look into different types of seaweeds, we'll find like, Fucus sort of like, it takes a while to establish itself, but it is very, very resilient. It also has higher ash content. Higher ash is like, the minerals that are present, compared to alva and gracilaria, it has a higher ash content or higher mineral content. And so this is consistent with the fact that it can bind with metals. Of course, like, if you look at Fucus, it's kind of, it gives you that, feeling that it's very, moist, and also it's kind of thick, and it stores a lot of fat granules. It has higher fat, but these are good fat. And Fucus has a tendency to hibernate. I mean, I don't like to use the word hibernate, but it's probably like, more simplified version of overwintering. And during that time, it stores a lot of, fat, oil, globules, proteins, different types of minerals, because it's really, trying to feed itself. Okay, so that even if it doesn't carry out photosynthesis at a very rapid rate compared to the greens, it still can satiate its hunger. Okay. All right, so let's look into alva lactuca. As you can see, alva lactuca is very, membranous, like, very leafy kind. And once again, seaweeds do not have true leaves, true roots, true stems. Why I'm saying this? Because they do not have any vascular tissues. So unless the plants have vascular tissues, I cannot call them true roots, true leaves, and stems, or rather stems, roots, and leaves. So we can say leaf-like, leafy, root-like, or stem-like, but we cannot say it is the leaf, because all leaves have vascular tissues. So are the stems and the roots. So here, okay, the other thing is we use the word thallus to describe the body of an alga in general, not just the seaweeds, but also the microalgae. So what we found was the alva lactuca, the sea lettuce, has higher protein content compared to fucus. And of course, like the protein, was variable across the seasons and sometimes, peaking during spring to early summer because that is the time when they are showing their cell division, like they're growing, the vegetative growth is happening. So the other thing I wanted to mention is seaweeds, they start as benthic plants. That means they're not floaters in the beginning stages. They need, substrates to attach themselves and then they can grow. So after a while, they can detach from the substrates and they can become floaters. Now, there's another side of it, the evil side of seaweeds. I'm not going to talk about that, but they can also be, nuisance species, just like algal bloom. So most people think algae or algal bloom are caused by microalgae. Yes, it is true, but seaweeds can also cause these blooms. And I'm not going to talk about that right now because, our focus is on nutrition. Maybe some other day, if we have the opportunity, I will be sharing the ugly side of seaweeds. But, that's why I said, seaweeds can be a blessing as well as a curse. And I'm not focusing on the curse because if it is us who are making it a curse, because due to our, uh, unfair, practices related to agriculture, urban sprawl, industrialization, everything are contributing to the nutrient runoff. And when these algae, they are finding all these nutrients in the environment, wow, it's food, you're giving me food and I'll grow. That is exactly the same response that we are seeing. So my perspective was like, hey, we have all these seaweeds and they are growing in a prolific manner. Why not harvest them and study them? And then send the message to maybe the aqua farmers, hey, we have all these different resources and we have the environment. Think about starting something with the seaweed. So, and that's something I will be talking also towards the end. So Gracilaria tigvai, which is the red seaweed, we found that the protein levels are slightly higher than alva, but not throughout, but during in specific months. Interestingly, the fiber and the ash content are higher than alva, but lower than fucus. So that's what we found. So it's sort of more like a balanced seaweed species, whatever we have. So as I said, if you want more information, you can delve into the literature that I have cited, and you'll be finding other details. All right, so currently we are also looking into the amino acid profiles. Amino acids, are the building blocks of proteins. We know that. And we are also working with Covan's lab, and they've been very helpful with running some of the analysis. Part of the analysis was done on campus, but we wanted to get something from a more renowned lab. So what we have found is that seaweeds, they are rich in amino acids and they actually have all the essential amino acids that our body requires. We have 9 essential amino acids. So with all these seaweeds that I have included, these seaweeds, they have all the essential amino acids. In fact, some of them have the non-essential amino acids too. Now, if you look into the slide and all these different species that have been cited, what we have found is so far, like, we are still in the process of publishing, we found that Gracilaria has shown the highest amino acid density. So the profiling, so they have been doing the profiling of amino acids. So Gracilaria has pretty much all the amino acids and also in higher concentration compared to, the other species. So it's definitely, that's why it said like, it's a great source of protein. Fucus also has, essential amino acids, and especially like valine and leucine. And because, like, if they say that, if you are like really tired, like, and exhausted, give yourself a dose of fucus, because fucus helps in muscle repair and also your metabolic activities. Codium, the dead man's fingers, I told you, like, it's scary looking. It actually has all the amino acids, so it is a sea vegetable. Okay, so it can be treated as a functional food. And alva, of course, like, alva is pretty common because, you can find it in the miso soup, in, seaweed salad. It mixed with, like, other greens, like enteromorpha. So it is a good option, for nutrition. So we also did a thorough study on antioxidant potential of seaweeds. So antioxidants, like, we looked into the carotenes, alpha and beta carotenes, and these are precursors of vitamin A. Tocopherols, which are the group of vitamin E, and ascorbic acid, commonly known as vitamin C. So all of these are present in seaweeds. So we studied, like, in alba, fucus, gracilaria, and they have shown the presence of all these different antioxidants. And of course, like, there are variations, this one has more of this, like alba, fucus, gracilaria, and there are variations. And we also looked into the seasonal variations. And so those who are not familiar with, like, the carotenes, if you look into some of the vegetables, for say, for instance, like, carrots, all the colored ones, these are actually fat soluble pigments, and it give, the plants the red, orange, or yellow color, like, bell peppers, I mean the red ones, like, the red peppers, the carrots, all are rich in uh, carotenoids. And these are the precursors to vitamin A. So that helps with your immunity, skin health, and also support, healthy immune function. And vitamin C, we all need, like, to boost our immunity. So something is coming up, like, something is happening with my throat. I overdose myself with vitamin, C, especially during the flu season. And when, COVID was happening, I was like overdosing myself with vitamin C just as a protection. And to an extent, it helped. And sometimes, even in spite of that, you will get. But even if you have the illness, your body will be well equipped to fight it off. So that is the reason, like, you need all these goodies in your system. And if you know, if you're getting it from the seaweeds, you're well covered, believe me. All right. So, and then tocopherols, like, and as I said, these are fat soluble, and they also help not just with, immune system, but also with your cardiovascular and neurological health. All right. So let's move on to seaweeds in global cuisine. And I know, like, Bronwyn, you asked the question, like, what kind of seaweeds you would like to, eat. And that's a great question. And I love the question because, I wanted to see the diverse, forms of seaweeds in relation to your answers. And yes, you did, like, I did see some diverse answers. Sushi, like, I mean, sushi has become so popular. Like, when I moved to Salisbury, there was only one Japanese restaurant. Now, like, I have to really count. I'm pretty sure across the bridge, there's so many. So sushi restaurants, I mean, Japanese restaurants or Korean restaurants are all, all over, and sushi rolls are very, very popular. Even at the regular superstores, you have, sushi. So nori, like, it's very popular all over. There's a global appeal to it. And then kombu broth, wakame soup, then salads with seaweed. So all these are, an integral part of the Asian, Irish, and Polynesian diets. And of course, like, we are seeing a growing demand in the Western world. Um, we visited in Japan. Like, my husband had a conference in 20, I think in 2000. Okay, so we went there. Me and my daughter also joined him. So for breakfast, they had like different kinds of seaweeds, real assortment of seaweeds. I was wondering, wow, seaweed salad for breakfast. And it tasted amazing. And I could see that, like, how well integrated seaweeds were in the cuisine of in Japan. And then we went to China. I saw seaweeds. Singapore, seaweeds. So seaweeds have been gaining a lot of popularity here, but seaweeds have been an integral part of the culture in the Asian countries. Now, I don't know how many of you have heard about blue zones. So, blue zones are those zones where people, where longevity exists. Like, people live up to over 100 years. The average age is between 90 and 95, and people are living there holistically, and they eat healthy, and also their lifestyles are very different. Like, they sleep well, they're happy, and they exercise, and they also follow a very good nutritionally dense diet. Okinawa, like, in Japan, is one of the blue zones. And I've done some research on, like, generally, like, to understand more about that blue zone. I got really fascinated about that culture. And the Okinawans, they start their day with seaweeds. They're heavily, into pescatarian diet. They eat very little meat. But throughout the day, they munch, seaweeds. They eat different kinds of seaweeds. They're next to the ocean, so they harvest a lot of seaweeds, process those seaweeds. So seaweeds, they live with seaweeds. Practically, this, they sleep with seaweeds. They, wake up with seaweeds. They bid good night with seaweeds. That means, like, seaweeds are a part of their culture, and they live up to 110, I mean, 105, 10, and that's how they've lived. It's not like all of a sudden they became aware. That is part of their culture, and that is why, the Okinawa has been designated as a blue zone. So if you look into the different, cultures, like, where people are living harmoniously, and people are, um, eating more holistic kind of, food, there is a reward to that. And what is that reward? Longevity. And also, like, less or lower incidence of diseases. Now, one thing I have to mention, like, one of my friends, when I was, discussing, what happened to me, one of my friends pointed out something interesting that I forgot to share. Like, when I had that tumor, it was in 1993. That was the time when we also witnessed a rapid spread of GMOs in the 1990 through 1997. All the foods, all the fruits, vegetables were GMO. And sadly, these foods were not labeled. So maybe I was thinking I was eating very healthy, but I was actually having GMO. And GMOs are the leading cause of many kinds of diseases, including cancers. So there is a correlation, like, what was happening that time. And, because I was in my 20s, and, usually those things are very rare. Like, you get to hear, I'm not saying, like, it never happened, but, in my early 20s, getting that kind of a tumor, there was something, it was not just unexpected, but something had to do with the environment. And I could see some kind of like a correlation with the GMOs. And because I was like, eating things, without like looking or reading the labels. And of course, as I said, not all the, food, the produce that are found here are labeled as GMOs, unlike what we see in Europe and in other countries. All right, so this is a very fun thing I used to do, like, edible algae symposium. So in two of my courses, marine botany, which is a course for the undergraduates, and also in my marine and estuarine ecology, uh, this is for the seniors as well as for the graduate students. So before COVID happened, every year we used to have edible algae symposium. So what is edible algae symposium? So we actually assigned like, a particular seaweed species to every group of students. So we divided the class into different groups of students and gave them a seaweed that I got from the main Seacoast Vegetables. That's a very good company. So if you want to like, buy seaweeds, I would definitely recommend. It's in Maine. And they do a very good job, like, with processing, and all these things are grown also organically. So the students, like, they did research and then they actually prepared a dish out of the assigned seaweed and they presented, at the edible algae symposium that used to happen at the end of the course. And so they were judged based on their content knowledge on that seaweed as well as their culinary skills. So here, like, these are some of the photos. I was looking for photos. It's been a while, and all of them have graduated. All my students have graduated. So I think this is the one, like, the one in the bottom right is a quiche or some kind of like a muffin they made. I can't remember. And here's the dip that they make out of seaweeds. And I think it could be kombu. I mean, I couldn't find, what was it. But I remember that, the tortilla chips went very well with the dip that was made out of seaweeds. And this was a seaweed drink that one of them made, which was fantastic. I still remember, like, I don't know what they've put, honey or something. It was so soothing and very, very refreshing. And here, like, we are like all the judges, and so we used to have a feast, like, come and enjoy the seaweed, delicacies and judge the presentations. So that was a fun thing, we used to do. So, there's a wealth of literature. Now I'm moving to section C, which is seaweeds in sustainable agriculture. So there's a wealth of literature, like, on seaweeds as agricultural products, in crop production and animal feed and livestock applications. So, so this is another aspect of seaweed. Like, seaweeds can be an excellent replacement of all these different fertilizers that we rampantly use, because seaweeds are also providing the nourishment to the plant. And they're also rich in NPK, so we should not forget about that, and the trace elements that are imparting to the soil fertility. They, as mentioned, they are rich in proteins, polysaccharides, peptides, polyphenols, all this good stuff like antioxidants, vitamins, and proteins, dietary fiber. So why not apply to the plants, help plants with plants? So one of the papers, that really caught my attention was a study was done with seaweeds, seaweed applications on tomato plant. So what the study depicted was, when the seaweed was applied in the form of a foliar spray to the tomato plant, those tomato plants that were treated with seaweed biostimulant, they actually showed increased production of lycopene. Lycopene is the red pigment, and lycopene is an antioxidant. So I was like wondering, like, how about, like, if I use seaweed foliar spray to treat my plants? And that's when, like, kind of I put another angle to my research, and there's somebody I need to admit. And you know, added that angle, or rather added that, sub project to my research. And so here we are. We are also working with sustainable agriculture with emergent technologies. So this is also funded by another grant from the United States Department of Agriculture. And we are also using seaweed biostimulant to treat some of these plants. So we have all these different, like, technologies. And of course, like, these are in collaboration with um, the professor in engineering, and there are also, like, other faculty from other disciplines. So but primarily, like, Dr. Nak Chaudhary, he's the responsible person for the farm board, and we are using, like, his facility to grow our crops, and we are treating them with seaweed biostimulant. So FarmBot, so you may ask me, what is FarmBot? Like, FarmBot is actually an open source computer controlled robotic farming system that can actually automate all major gardening tasks. So right now, like, the the watering is automated. So you can, like, from your app, you can control the water system, like, how much to water. And but other things can also be automated. But right now we have the water, the the water is being automated, so we don't have to really go and water, or like we can do it from the comfort of our home or from anywhere. So we have an outdoor farm board and as well as an indoor farm board. So in indoor farm board is primarily, it's a, like a control environment agriculture. And so there's precise control of light, temperature, humidity, and irrigation schedule. So we kind of, we have set it up in such a way. So the robots, they're also collecting, time lapse imaging, and they can, that way, the plant physiology can be monitored. Now we also have a tower garden setup. Like, so there are two tower gardens that we have. And so you may ask, what is a tower garden? So tower garden is a vertical aeroponic growing system that actually uses nutrient enriched water instead of soil. So it's soilless agriculture. And we are using, rock wool cubes, to grow these plants and then transfer it. And so we have all these different technologies, and we are growing plants, and we are also using uh, the seaweed biostimulants. So some of them are treated, some of them are, controlled, they are not treated. And what we are doing is, after, like, the experiments are over, we are harvesting these plants. We are taking the morphometrics data, uh, like, the biomass, the leaf area index, and then the root length. So all these different, parameters that define morphology. Besides morphology, we are also looking into the antioxidants, not of the seaweeds, but of the plants that are being harvested and that are being treated, and as well as controlled. So we have a collaboration with the food chemistry lab, and the faculty there is my collaborator on this USDA grant. And we are looking into the total flavonoid content and total phenolic content, as well as the, the activities of the antioxidant, like antioxidant assays are being done. And especially, like, the oxygen radical absorbance capacity assays. And then there's another assay which is called DPPH. And so all these are being, like, conducted. So one thing, I mean, we are once again, like, this is going in full swing. So one thing that we are noticing is that the plants that are treated with seaweeds, they have higher flavonoid content, and not just flavonoid, also the phenolic content. So these are antioxidants. So that's promising, but still, we need more data. So at this stage, we haven't yet published, but I'm just sharing, where uh, our projects are heading into. So results are quite promising, and we are very excited. So this is what we are using, CBio, which is a soluble seaweed extract. And we are also making our own, biostimulant from seaweed extract. So one is like the commercial one versus our own. All right, so the power of seaweeds. Now, before I conclude, I want to bring in this awareness to all of you that we have, I mean, I know, some of you are not from the Delmarva region. I'm like, because I'm here, I'm kind of partial to the Eastern Shore, but our state is rich in natural resources. We should be, thinking, little differently. We should encourage businesses that would look into functional foods. So we don't have functional food industries unlike what we see in California or Maine or in some of the states where seaweeds are more accepted as, nutrition. So another thing is the feed supplement markets. Seaweeds can be excellent, um, food for the cattle as well as for um, other animals, and also the fish meal can be also prepared with seaweeds. So all these products, like the product development industry, should be encouraged in the state of Maryland. This is this is my personal perspective, and I'm pretty sure many of you will agree with me, or you may disagree. That's fine. And then since we are getting good results with seaweeds, I feel that this is something that need to be nurtured more and educate the people about the benefits of utilizing seaweeds as a biostimulant and also as a fertilizer. So that's what I thought. Like the power of seaweeds is immense. We cannot deny that. All right, so I would like to conclude here. And before I conclude, I would like to acknowledge Bronwyn Mitchell Strong for inviting me to give a talk on this topic that is very close to my heart. And also the Natural History Society of Maryland and all these different grants, National Institute of Food and Agriculture's ISAF project, NASA's DREAM project, USDA's Evans Allen project, and I also thankful to Dr. Abhijit Nagchaudhary, who's my primary collaborator on these different grants, and my entire team of graduate and undergraduate students. Without them, I would not have been here. So they are the ones who have been helping and who have been passionate about this research. I mean, it's not just one research, these are various, uh, sub projects, and I try to bring in few together, but not all. So thank you very much for lending me your ears. And I would end with a quote that I have written. Seaweeds rise with the tides like ancient whispers feeding the ocean, nourishing the human spirit and awakening the soil with their gentle biostimulant power. In their delicate blades lies a quiet promise, resilience, renewal, and the nourishment of life itself. And this was written by me in January of 2024. Thank you. And I'm open to questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mitra. If we will unshare, we'll come back. I'm going to put a spotlight on you, and we'll open it up to questions. Remember, raise your hand, and I'll call on you if you want to ask a question directly. And I'll go through some of the questions that are already populating the chat box. That was amazing. And thank you so much for sharing your personal story with us, which made it all that more special. Can you unshare?
Sure, yeah. Let me stop share. Okay.
All right. There you go. Okay. So we have some questions here. What about how seaweeds interact with corals? Are there? It seems like seaweed can do everything. Can they help save the corals?
Well, there are like, if you look at the different coral reefs, it's also the seaweeds. They are playing, a very important roles, to building the coral reefs. And there is a symbiotic relationship between algae as well as corals, and we call them zooxanthellae. Zooxanthellae, it's like a win-win relationship, because what the coral is doing is providing protection to the algae, and especially the members of dinoflagellates, and then the dinoflagellates, they are preparing food for the coral. So it's like a they're there for their own benefits. Now what happens is, if let's say due to like rising temperatures and climate change and UV radiation, if the zooxanthellae are expelled out from the corals die. So it's like it's a very interesting live-in kind of relationship, where we find that if one dies, the other does not survive, because that's how mutualistic relationships are there. Just like lichen, it's a relationship between an alga and a fungus. So lichen is not like something out of its own. It's a relationship, and if one dies, the other dies too. So it's the partnership is like forever, everlasting, sometimes better than humans, right? What we see in uh, other species in a world is amazing. And and it's for real.
Continue to learn from them. So Norman was asking, and you sort of mentioned this in the presentation, if the seaweeds are absorbing all these toxins, is it
Mhm.
wise for us to eat them?
Well, that's the reason I mentioned that, like, if you are, let's say you're visiting, a beautiful coastal bay, and you find like, all these different seaweeds, like, they are like washing off, like, from the oceans. And you know that, well, let's say you identify those seaweeds and say, wow, like, I heard from Dr. Mitra's lecture that these are edible seaweeds. Should I be eating them in the raw? My answer is no. I wouldn't take a chance, because I don't know what is in there. Like, because they are also indicators of, pollution. And they are accumulating maybe all these heavy metals. So that's the reason I mean, in this case, this is the only case where I will be going after the processed seaweeds. And processed, it may sound like something very repulsive. Processed food, we talk about, like, stay away from processed foods, but this is actually different than the processed foods that we find in the supermarkets. These are not canned foods with all these different kinds of preservatives added to it. These are processed because you don't want those heavy metals or pollutants in your system. So go with the reliable seaweed producer,
Well, and
that
that goes in,
company that is well known, which is
yeah.
like, there are many in I, I would not say there are many in this country, but there are quite a few, like, that are doing good business. Okay,
Well,
where you can
that's
trust
Mark.
them.
Yeah, Mark has a follow-up question: is where's the best store, or where would you go find the seaweeds?
Okay, so if you, I mean, some of there are quite a few brands, like, I mean, if you are like looking at like some products made out of seaweeds that you want to incorporate slowly in your diet, like, seaweed chips. I actually, like, for our, edible algae symposium, we also used to order, different types of goodies, like, seaweed chips, nori sheets, and, seaweed noodles, which are very popular in Japan, like, because in the morning, the seaweed salad, seaweed, noodles, so many different, other seaweed, like seaweed rolls, not exactly the sushi rolls, but they kind of, make it like with the seaweeds, like it's very tasty, and with stuffed, vegetables or fish in it. So not the sushi roll I'm talking about. Like, it's different. Like, it's unless like, you eat it, you will not know. I didn't even know that it was made out of seaweeds until I read the label. So yes, like, you can, order some of the products. Thrive Market has a good collection of seaweed like products, seaweed based products. And the good thing about all these B corporations, like, if you want to buy from B certified corporations, I usually try to do that, like, because those are sustainable. They also, donate towards combating hunger or towards the rainforests. Um, so these are good causes. So yes, like, there are, companies out there in the United States that do sell seaweeds. Maine Seacoast Vegetables is a very good company. I think they've changed their name, but it's the same company. I can share it with Bronwyn, like, in case if you have interest in pursuing uh, the purchase of seaweeds. It is a good company to buy all the seaweeds. Those are safe, very reliable, and you know that you're not putting in any kind of chemicals that the seaweeds are good at in uh, absorbing. Yeah.
All right, Preston, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Um, I was wondering, why, like, me and my dad went on a trip to the Dominican Republic,
Mm-hmm.
and we heard that there was a really bad seaweed problem. This was just, last year. Um, and, um, our the resort that we went to was right by the water, and um the um the seaweed really stank. Like, you could smell it driving. You could smell it from a mile and a half away from the beach. We could smell it from our hotel room. Like, just very salty, like just tons of rotted seaweed, and they had trucks and stuff getting the seaweed out. In this one spot for a wedding, there was just tons. Like, do you have any idea why there was just suddenly so much seaweed?
Okay, so I briefly mentioned that, when we use different kinds of fertilizers in a rampant manner, like, indiscriminately, what is happening is those fertilizers, like especially the nitrogen and phosphorus, they run into the coastal, water system or any water bodies, and those are actually feeding the algae, not just the microalgae that are visible only under the microscope, but also to the macroalgae. Seaweeds are macroalgae. So they're loving the food that they're getting, and they are multiplying in a prolific manner. So what is happening is, this is where the seaweeds can be a curse. And they are multiplying and they're blocking the sunlight from reaching. And you went to the Dominican Republic, right? So there's like oceans everywhere. And so the sunlight, they're blocking the sunlight, and then the sunlight cannot reach beneath the water surface, and the plants that are there, like sea grasses, they're unable to photosynthesize. And many species of fish and then other organisms that reside in those seagrass beds, they're dependent on all these different plants. They also die. Now these seaweeds, they're growing, right? And they're dying also. They grow, they die, and they're impacting and they're absorbing a lot of nutrients. So there's like a lot of nutrient recycling, and the turbidity of water is impacted. So the water becomes more murky, turbid because of the growth of the seaweeds. And what the seaweeds are also doing, they are they are taking up the dissolved oxygen, right? And when they take, because plants, they need to breathe just like us. So they are taking up the dissolved oxygen, and that is leading to the decrease in oxygen concentration in the water systems. This is what we call hypoxia, lower oxygen concentration, and that is eventually leading to anoxia. Anoxia is lack of oxygen. Lack of oxygen can lead to dead zones. Dead zones is like no life can exist. And as a result, like in all these different other organisms, they are dying. And more organisms, then what is going to happen? Like the rotting starts, right? So you're not just smelling the seaweeds, but you're also smelling the other organisms that are mingled with seaweeds. And that is happening because of the seaweed proliferation. And not only that, the other problem is the seaweeds, they are respiring, right? They're taking up oxygen because they need to survive. And what is happening is, as a result of respiration, carbon dioxide is also formed, CO2. Carbon dioxide, when it dissolves in the water, we get carbonic acid. And that is why I mentioned, like, ocean acidification. That is one of the major causes of the decline in biodiversity. So, ocean acidification, when it happens, like many species, they're very, very sensitive to changes in the pH of this. It becomes acidic, right? So, pH goes down and they cannot survive due to the changes in the pH. And so, all of these factors are contributing to the deaths of other organisms. So, you can smell all these rotten bodies of different organisms along with the thalli of the seaweeds.
And it all
So,
happened because of the stuff that we put on the land that
yeah,
washed.
we put on, and also the other thing is, the greenhouse gases. One of the greenhouse gases is carbon dioxide. So, if carbon dioxide, there are different sources, by which the carbon dioxide enters the water body. One is, as I said, that seaweeds are playing direct role. Through respiration, they're producing carbon dioxide, goes into the water. Ocean acidification, carbon dioxide can come from other sources of greenhouse emissions, and then they mix it with water, and then what is happening? They are also causing the ocean acidification. Now the other thing is um, the melting of the glacier, right? Now one of the questions I saw, the salinity is very important. Like, if in the coastal environments, estuarine environments, oceans, like if the water becomes diluted, if there's more water is added, what is going to happen? The salinity will go down. And all these organisms that are very sensitive to changes in salinity will be responding negatively. So we are actually creating a havoc in the ecosystem. And that is precisely why we are seeing so many die-offs and eventual, decline in the biodiversity. It is very sad, but true.
All right. So there's the bad, and the ugly with the
Yeah.
sea.
So I
So,
did not focus too much on ugly, but but there
yeah,
is, there is an
yeah.
aspect of seaweeds where the ugliness can be revealed.
So when you eat seaweed, are we eating a lot of salt? That was one of the questions.
Yes, because they are like, they are, plants in the saline environment, seaweeds. We are not eating freshwater algae. And yes, so I would definitely recommend not adding any more salt because they're very high in, uh, sodium, sodium level. I mean, it varies from one species to another species. So when you are, like, let's say if you're cooking with seaweeds, I would suggest that wash it very thoroughly, even like, it is coming from a very reliable source and it's a processed seaweed, but still wash it very, very, very thoroughly and boil it, and then try to avoid adding more salt because the salt is natural from the seaweeds.
All right. And then Jackie says, how is all the seafood safe if it all comes from the same ocean and we've polluted the ocean?
That's a very good question. If we pollute the ocean, and there is biomagnification, as I was mentioning, if let's say the fish, I mean, I'm a pescatarian. I love seafood. Sometimes I don't think where it is coming from, how it is being harvested, blah, blah, blah. So, but if I see seafood, I just can't stop eating. But when I pause and contemplate, am I doing the right thing? Then probably I will not eat unless I know the source. So, because, color added and all those things, it's a big no-no. So, if it's coming from the wild ocean and it's not polluted, it's definitely safe to consume. And also you know, if it is uh, farmed. I mean, farmed is not always bad because farmed is more controlled. And if it is done in a more, sustainable way, because there are salmon that are being raised sustainably, and that those are farm salmon, and especially those that are coming from Norway, Canada, those are safer to eat, or Scotland. Scotland has more wild salmon. But if they're let's say, plastic, microplastics that can enter into the gut of the fish, and then if you eat that fish, there will be, biomagnification. So I would, proceed with caution. I mean, I cannot say that don't eat because, if you keep asking wherever you're eating, people will get annoyed. Either you don't eat or get to know the source, that's the best thing. But that most of the restaurants, they do not know the sources. So that's why I prefer going to farm to table kind of restaurants where I know the sources. I mean, I know I can trust them. uh, but it doesn't happen all the time, and especially if you're traveling, it's hard to find the right kind of restaurants. So you are actually taking a chance, or just go vegetarian, for the time being.
All right, Alan, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
So thank you very much. Two questions. I know 1993 was a turning point, and just sort of focus of your studies, but could you take us sort of as far back as you could go, that just where you first identified just any interest in studying any kind of biology or plant life, the origin of that in your life, if you remember before that 1993. And then the other thing, I mean, what you did with yourself was kind of your own little personal experiment. And I'm sorry if I missed this, but have there been sort of controlled studies, trying to treat thyroid types of tumors with, the way you treated yourself? So thank you again.
All right, so excellent question. So I became fascinated with plants at an early age. When I was growing up, I love plants. I had I saw my mother, growing beautiful, flowers. And so plants were, both my parents loved plants, and both of them had green thumbs. I thought I didn't have a green thumb. Like somehow I felt like I was not as good as my parents, but then I kind of, cultivated an interest. And at some point, I kind of detested eating animals. Like I was a voracious meat eater. From there, I kind of became a vegetarian for some time. And then again, I went back to eating meat, and back and forth, back and forth. But I always had a soft corner for the plants, And I pursued, a bachelor's degree in botany at the university in Calcutta, and then my master's degree in botany. And then I came to the United States to pursue my doctoral degree in plant biology at North Carolina State University. And I was really not working with, I was telling Bronwyn in the beginning, before we started this seminar, that I was working with fossils, but fossil plants, like palynology, paleopalynology is the right definition of, or the right word, for the study of fossil, pollen. And then I never thought I would be, working with living ones, and especially algae. Although my master's thesis was in phycology, which is study of algae, I worked with microalgae and not macroalgae. So I wanted to study with microorganisms, but more on the plant side. That's what I did. And then when this thing happened, I fell in love with seaweeds. Just I thought like, wow, like, seaweeds are amazing. And to answer your question, I know like, somebody from North Carolina State, and that person didn't have cancer but was diabetic, but was on macrobiotic diet, and could control like the blood sugar levels without taking insulin. So that person was taking insulin, so from insulin to no insulin, and that happened due to macrobiotic diet. So I'm not going to say like only seaweeds can cause all these miracles, because if I eat seaweeds and if I have other bad habits, it's not going to work. So together, like they can make this a more um, productive for you. So if you change your lifestyles, like uh, stay tuned to the environment, uh, have good night's sleep, at least 7 to 8 hours every night, and then practice mindful practices like yoga, meditation, like anything that is like movement. Like movement is extremely important, for all ages. And also adopt a holistic diet. It doesn't have to be like in all seaweeds, but seaweeds do have all these different um, nutritionally, active ingredients, and it's a no-brainer. Literature, there's an abundant, wealth exists in terms of literature, where we have seen how these are like controlled studies, as well as there have been studies done by many physicians where they have noticed that I mean, not directly on humans, but they have done in other mammals, and where they have seen like shrinking of tumors. So that there's a direct correlation where it has been reported. So mine was like, yes, it was an experiment, but it was also based on the books that were there. And these books were written by physicians, as I mentioned, like German physician, and then the educators from Japan. And basically, like I looked into the food habits of people in Japan, Okinawa. Like as I said, like they have adopted a lifestyle where they have like incorporate a lot of seaweeds in their daily diets. And based on my experiences visiting these countries, starting from Japan, China, Singapore, Taiwan, like where I found like people, they have embraced seaweeds, and it's like not like it's not a big deal. This is something like they eat every day. And here, like, oh my God, seaweeds. Like I had big issues in hosting the edible algae symposium and getting the judges, because they were so resistant towards like tasting those seaweeds. They said those are scums, I cannot have those. Those are the answers I've received. They had mind blocks. I mean, but it was not my intention to go and like convince them. I said, look, no, no, if you're not open minded, then I would not force you to come to the symposium. But if you feel that, yes, based on like scientific research, and especially data driven research, you feel comfortable, then be my judge. So,
So I was going to add on to your beautiful quote. You've also got kind of a personal quote there of,
thank
it
you.
not only saved your life, it kind of created a life work for you.
Yeah, I merged my like passion with my profession. So it happened, but it didn't happen overnight, because it probably like it was the calling. you know Sometimes I feel that there's a way the universe talks to us. So I take it as the divine or intervention from the universe. And we don't get to see everything in the beginning, but later on, like we realize. So that realization takes a while to come. And I'm glad that happened eventually. And I have been a big advocate for seaweeds.
Well, yeah, and we're so glad that you spent some time with us this evening.
Mhm.
And man, seaweed, it could be I think you're right. I mean, we need to put some more investments in some seaweed industries and working right here in Maryland, because it seems like it could be a future in seaweed. Forget plastics. If you knew The Graduate, the future is seaweed. And I know that tomorrow morning I'm gonna get up and have me a bowl of seaweed for breakfast. That's what I'm gonna eat. And I'm sure many people who are on here today will get up and have their bowl of seaweed as well. But we really appreciate coming and sharing your knowledge with us. Hope that we can maybe go out to the Eastern Shore, see you, and go seaweed collecting with
Absolutely.
you. That would be great. Everybody stay well, stay curious.
Thank you so much.
And stay warm, everybody. Take care. We'll see you next week for the stalk-eyed flies. Why do they have eyes on the end of these stalks? Well, we're going to find out. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.